get into this epic solo then, and it's just chock full of so many great ideas. But as you heard in my playthrough, I didn't play it absolutely note for note. I kind of started off playing it more or less note for note. I had some of the sort of signature licks in there, but then I kind of went off a little bit and did my own thing. And that's really the approach that I suggest you take with this one. It's, you know, unlike the Lloyd solo, it's not really a learnable solo note for note. I did at one point consider whether I should try learning this one note for note, but in the end I decided against it. A, because it would have taken me 6 months to get something like this down, and B, it just felt a little bit pointless and futile to learn what is obviously a very spontaneous, freely improvised solo, and you know, try and learn that kind of nerdily note for note. So I decided against doing that. But you know, having said that, I do think it's an excellent solo to study. So we can go through it, take a look at what's going on, do a bit of an analysis on it, and yeah, by all means steal some licks and ideas here and there, and then you can kind of do things your own way. I think that's by far the best kind of approach to take with a solo such as this one, and that's really what I did in my playthrough. I mean, I know this solo so well, I just listened to it countless times, so yeah, I have kind of memorized it, and I can hear some of those melodies in my head, and which is why I kind of reached for some of those phrases. And what I did try to do in my playthrough was to pay attention to the overall kind of contour of the solo and make that fairly similar to what Verlaine was doing. So by contour, I just mean the way the solo builds, it ebbs and flows and then reaches this kind of climax and crescendo. So I wanted that to happen, but I wasn't slavishly copying everything that he was doing. There were certain kind of landmarks that I did want to hit, kind of signature bits of the solo, particularly towards the end where he goes into that, you know, ascending bit with the droning D string, and then there's the double stop section as well. That's more of a kind of hook that's composed, but for the rest of it I was trying to be a bit more free. Let's get into this then, and I might start by just touching on the chords that we're playing over here. So we're in the key of D, like the rest of the tune. It's got this D mixolydian kind of flavour, and the rhythm guitar here, I'm assuming played by Richard Lloyd, is essentially just playing the main riff, but there are some subtle differences which I didn't appreciate until I did a deep analysis of this tune. So one thing that happens in the solo section is the riff is kind of turned around, so we're starting with this double stop shape and then going to this one rather than the other way round that you hear in the verses of the tune. So we're starting with A and D, and then going to B and D. And then the other difference, it's a minor thing really, but you can hear that Lloyd usually has the open D string in there as well. I'm not hearing that when Verlaine plays the riff, but here we've got, got all three of those notes happening. Like with the main riff, you can play that with downstrokes if you like it. This might also sound good if you play it with upstrokes. So I'll leave that up to you, but that's the foundation for this solo. So as I said in the very first video where I looked at the main riff, it's really a D power chord going to this kind of a D6 sound, so it's setting up that D major sound. And then in terms of the solo, we'll go through it and do a bit of an analysis, but it's largely this D mixolydian kind of a thing. And if you're unfamiliar with the mixolydian modes, you might like to watch my series of modes videos. I did one on mixolydian, and in that I go into a lot of detail about the theory behind this sound. But the simplest way to think about it in the context of this song is it's a D major scale with a flattened 7th degree. So the notes are D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, that's the flat 7, and then we're back to D again. And yes, that's the same notes as the G major scale, but the important difference when you're thinking modally is that D is now the home note. That's the tonic. Everything is revolving around that D. So you kind of have to think and hear things differently if you're playing mixolydian. And before tackling this solo, you might like to just get some of this mixolydian stuff under your fingers. And if you do like this sound, then it's well worth mapping out those notes all over the fretboard, and I would tend to do that using the caged system. So in every zone of the fretboard you've got that mixolydian scale under your fingers. I would learn it as its own thing, as a scale in its own right, just as I learn the major scale and the minor scale. I can learn the Mixolydian mode. Alternatively, you can think in terms of that parent major scale, G major, as long as you bear in mind that you want to be emphasizing the D notes now instead of the G notes. Or you could kind of think D major and think about flattening that seventh note as well. So there are multiple ways that you can think about this stuff. Also, of course, just use your ear to find the good notes, which is what I do some of the time as well. But if this is a sound that you like, then I strongly recommend just really going all out and learning the Mixolydian mode as its own thing. Let's get into some of the detail then. And I've got my transcription of the solo in front of me just here on my laptop, so I'm going to be referring to that. I think what I'm going to do is just go through it phrase by phrase and just discuss what's going on in terms of the ideas and the techniques. So the first thing you hear is just, I love the way this solo starts, very kind of low key and casual, just some kind of D notes, just like very, very minimal. I'm playing these as an open fourth string, playing that note rhythmically. It seems quite kind of free and random. You can just play those D notes. I mean, you could play that D note wherever you like. It feels right for me just to have it as an open string. I think I was just kind of playing around with getting different tones by picking a bit closer to the bridge perhaps. So kind of very kind of gentle opening to the solo. And the way I'm feeling the solo for the most part is in terms of 4 and 8 bar chunks. So for the most part you've got these 8 bar phrases. So certainly the opening bit of the solo, you've got 8 or so bars just playing that open D string. So if you do try playing this solo yourself, it's important to be obviously feeling the beat, but also feeling time passing and feeling those chunks of time in 4s and 8s. That's a really useful skill for a musician to have. And then after those first 8 bars, we're into the next idea, which is this nice melodic thing. It's this really a little melody. It's you could think of this as being D major pentatonic. You're starting on this high A, you're coming down as a little bend, and then he just repeats it. Maybe changes the rhythm slightly. So that's another kind of chunk. Is that 4 bars or 8 bars? Before we're into the next idea, and we've got this kind of just a very simple little motif. It's mainly just 3 notes. So this is an E, a G, and an F sharp, and just playing with that motif, just messing about with rhythms. You've got lots of rhythmic options with this kind of feel. Sometimes he's playing kind of metronomically and thinking quarter notes, eighth notes. Other times it just seems to float a little bit against the tempo of the tune, and both of those things are nice, and you can have both of those things going on in the same solo. But really just find those notes, just experiment with some different rhythms. Then he develops that idea a little bit. It's a little bit busier. And then that's a nice little melody there. And then coming down. I mean, as far as where I'm playing this stuff on the neck, I can't guarantee this is exactly how Tom Verlaine does it. I'm just kind of using my kind of instincts, and you can, as always on the guitar, there are multiple ways you could play these same notes and phrases. So I'm just going for something that feels good and falls under the fingers naturally and flows. But you can experiment with how you play some of these phrases. I mean, you can obviously look at live footage, but this is a solo that Tom Verlaine would never play the same way twice, so you can't actually verify how some of these phrases are played in terms of the fret numbers and all of that stuff. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Just you get the basic melodic idea. That's the important thing here. Next little phrase is an idea that I did learn note for note, just because I thought it was really striking and wanted to learn it. And that's the lick that goes like this. So I absolutely love this idea. It's really kind of weird and angular. It's got these big interval skips in it as well. And this is quite a feature of the Tom Verlaine style. It's not just kind of running up and down predictable pentatonic scales or whatever. We've got these kind of weird kind of fourths and fifths and big intervals in it. You know, so many players, they just play in scale steps, so mostly kind of seconds or thirds at the most. But here we've got some nice angular wide intervals as well, and multiple ways you could play this. I'm starting off down at this end of the neck, and then kind of working my way up on the G and D strings. So that's great. A big leap up there. Another leap up there, these kind of fifth intervals. And then we arrive at this 10th fret note, and we can just... So contrasting kind of the melodic movement there, sometimes just being content just to stay static and to play a single note and just find some interesting rhythms. And then he's kind of coming out of that phrase. Kind of coming down in position, and then it kind of starts climbing a little bit higher at this point, I think. I'm just kind of reading off my transcription here, but we're kind of climbing up the B string, I think. So just climbing up a single string. So that's another cool thing that Verlaine tends to do quite a lot. So just hearing that scale along the length of a single string can kind of slide between some of those notes. And you've got some bending options as well. So and here the intensity starts to build a little bit, and that's something I tried to do in my playthrough. So you're starting off delicately, you can just playing really softly, but when it starts to build, you really start to dig in, and so I'm picking really pretty hard there, kind of fierce vibrato as well, just as a way of building intensity. And it could be that there's a little bit of vibrato arm action going on in this solo as well. I'm not absolutely certain about that. It's a little bit hard to say whether there's some of the vibrato is done with the bar or whether it's just a really fierce kind of finger vibrato. I know that he has got this really quite distinctive finger vibrato, which is quite wide and fast, but it's certainly something you could experiment with if you're playing on a jazz master or any guitar that's got a whammy in some of the more intense sections of this solo. That's just another option that you've got. Into the next kind of 8-bar chunk, he's kind of playing these ideas on the fourth string. So we've got that Mixolydian melody, and we're alternating that with some open D stuff. So it's important to hear and visualize that Mixolydian scale along the length of one string. Then you can improvise with those kind of ideas. Lots of mileage you can get out of that idea. I particularly like the bit, I'm playing it up here where he's kind of going. that's not note for note, but he's got this open string, 9 and 10, and then just changing the top note. Big intervals for that nice angular sound, and still the intensity is building. He's got this idea where he goes climbing up the B string. It's kind of a scale sequence, I suppose. We've got a group of 3 notes, so we've got these 3 notes here. We're starting with the middle note, descending, and then going up to the highest note, and then repeating that in the next portion of the scale. So really effective. And that's a cool note to bend. So this is the 20th fret on the B string. You know, you can play that quite wildly. You know, give it plenty of vibrato. And I think he continues climbing. You know, way up high. You can go over onto the top string. Kind of find some interesting sort of pathways around the fretboard, so coming down a kind of different way along the top string perhaps. Yeah, I like this idea. He gets into a little motif. This is just 10, 12 and 13 on the B string. It's not note for note, but you can just get those 3 notes, and it's about the rhythm, that kind of idea. This nice, and you can play that metronomically, or you could just, I think what I did in my playthrough was just kind of float the rhythm a little bit there. You know, I like that feeling that sometimes the solo you know, seems to kind of drift a little bit, and then you can come back to time. And what happens next? We've had this bit. That's what I've got on my transcription. So there's, you know, some serious movement about the fretboard. We're going from one end of the fretboard to the other here. You know, quite how he's working his way down, it's a bit difficult to say, but you know, I was doing it like this. So the open string there, then we can move down to the open position. That's where you can perhaps, you know, have a listen and see what you think, but I can detect perhaps a low D note there, which is sort of indicates that Verlaine might be tuned down to drop D for this tune. I'm not absolutely certain about that on the studio recording. Certainly live he does often like to, he did often like to tune down to drop D, and that works well for this one. And then we're really building now, and the whole band is building, the drums in particular. And we're going back up high again, so I think he's kind of climbing mostly on the top string at this point. And then, you know, kind of the climax of the solo is at this point, I think. So go right way up high on the top string. You know, 15, 17 and 19. Everything builds. Then it kind of falls back a little bit as we go into this kind of melody played on the third string. This feels like it's one of those landmarks in the solo that I spoke about. This is a bit that he would play the same every time. This is more of a kind of riff or a motif, so that the solo kind of peaks with these kind of wild high notes. Then we're coming back into this part here. And the idea here is we're just climbing the Mixolydian scale on the third string. But we've got this droning root note, the open D string, and the rhythm is like this. when we reach this point, a double stop, so 17th fret on the G and B strings. Then we're into the next phrase, which is this double stop thing on the B and G strings. So we come down again, and once again we're climbing. So this is just the Mixolydian mode harmonized in thirds. So we've either got this shape here, where both of the notes are at the same fret, it's at the 7th fret here, and then 9 and 8, so where the notes are on an adjacent fret, so major thirds and minor thirds, and we're just climbing up through the scale. Ending with that same double stop at the 17th fret. And I'm adding in this note here at the 20th fret on the B. So, and that's really the end of the solo. Then we're into that building kind of octaves section, which I want to talk about in the next video. So a ton of great ideas in there. I suggest you just sift through that lot and grab the ideas that that you find interesting. You can get so much out of this. I've certainly stolen, if not licks per se, I've stolen more the kind of approach that Tom Verlaine uses. So those kind of angular ideas, that's something I use a lot in my own playing. His kind of time as well, that sort of floating around with the time, that's something I use. Also just the intensity as well. I like it when he's digging in hard and it's got that kind of fierce vibrato. So all of that stuff are things that I've taken from Tom Verlaine's playing. You might find other things that you like and want to take from this. So as I hope I've made clear, there's a lot that you can get out of studying a solo such as this one. This will be a great one to put in the looper. Just put these chords in a looper, and then you can go for it with the D Mixolydian mode. So to start with, maybe you could just use just a portion of that scale. You can get a lot of results just with a simple 1 octave scale. We saw how Verlaine was just getting some beautiful stuff just out of a few notes. So that might be a starting point, and then you can develop it from there. Mixolydian mode in other positions. Try some of this stuff going up and down the length of single strings. You can get that droning D note in there, double stops, thirds, tons of options. So have fun with that, and then in the next video I'm gonna wrap things up as far as this song goes, the actual guitar parts go, by looking at some of the other bits. So what happens after the solo, and there's a little breakdown section, and just sort of cover all of the other extra little bits. So see you for that video very soon.